Three. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the College to Calling Summit. My name is Miko Lau, and the purpose of this show is to inspire, educate, and empower recent college graduates, people in their early 20s, on how they can create a successful, abundant life centered around what they love doing. And today we have a very special guest here with us. His name is Scott Allan. Scott is an author and also a personal development coach that's help people overcome their mental barriers, limitations that really keep them stuck in life so they can go out there and do the work and create a life that they truly love. And I know Scott has written multiple best-selling books on overcoming self-defeating behaviors and really letting go of routines that don't serve us in life. So I'm really, really excited to have you on here, Scott. And I know you're tuning in all the way from Japan. So how are you doing today?
Doing great, thanks. Yeah, it's still it's a beautiful day here. It's about 18 degrees, so just enjoying life.
That's awesome. Yeah, so let's jump straight into this. I would love to hear more about your journey. I know you did something absolutely super admirable for so many young people like myself, that you made the decision to move from Canada all the way to Japan. So what exactly happened? What was that inspiration that got you to make this huge transition to move all the way over there?
Yeah, so I remember it was a few years ago, actually it's about 20 years ago. So when I moved here, so I've been here for quite a while, but I was going through a period of, change, personal change, transition, transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And I took a look at my life and I realized that I wasn't really doing what I was feeling, what I felt like I should have been doing, which is like, I wanted to travel. I wanted to write books. I had a list of all these things I wanted to do and I wasn't doing them. So I decided to do something I'd never done before. And I thought, I'm just going to give away all my stuff and get on a plane and go traveling. So that's kind of how the idea started. But there was a lot more to it than that. There was a lot of planning involved, actually, even though, I was single at the time. I didn't have any ties or anything. So it was, relatively easy for me to make that decision. But what changed, I think, was the decision to actually do that. The decision to making that decision that I was going to just do this thing, set in motion these other events that seemed to follow after that. So for example, like I had not planned on coming to Japan. I didn't say, okay, I'm going to move to Japan in 6 months. I said, I'm going to get on a plane and go traveling to Asia. That was my plan. But as soon as I made that decision, I started to find these other coincidences started coming up where I would meet people who had gone traveling. I would talk to them and they would inspire me and motivate me. And then one day I was reading the newspaper and I came across this ad that said, teach English in Japan. I thought, what a great idea. Why don't I try that? And I just, threw out a resume there and not expecting anything. And a month later, next thing I know, I was in an interview office in Vancouver with these people from Japan who flew there to interview 30 people for 3 positions, teaching English, by the way. And I ended up getting the job. So they arranged everything for me to come here. And that's just kind of the long, short story of how I got here. But just going back to, the start of anything that whenever I made a change in my life, it always went back to making that decision and not wavering from it no matter what. So
got it. So you didn't have the actual plan to move to Japan and stay there. It was just following that calling and making the decision to move forward. Okay. Yeah. So what made you decide to stay over there for like permanently?
I just really enjoyed the being in some place different, when I lived in Canada. I mean, Canada's a great place, of course. It's my home country, great place to live. I was working as an electrical engineer at the time. So I just gave all that up, came here, and I realized everything was just different. I was in a different culture, learning a different language, doing things I, only once dreamed of, if I dreamed of it at all. Yeah. And I wanted to continue to do that. So I really love that, just every day being different. And
Mm-hmm.
to some extent, even though I've been here for, 20 plus years, I still experience that, that sense of adventure. So, and because I've come here, it's given me a chance to travel to a lot of other countries as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like going to the Great Wall of China or scuba diving in Palau, or having all these adventures that I never would have had if I hadn't made that leap.
So how old were you when you make that decision to just let go of everything and make this new change in your life? Were you still like in your 20s back then?
I was about
Okay.
27, I guess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And you
So
mentioned like at that time you didn't have that many obligations and things that weigh you down for you to make this huge transition. But was it scary for you to make that move?
actually, not as a little bit, I guess. Well, actually,
Mm-hmm.
other people were more scared for me than I was, I think. So they're like, "What are you doing? You're giving up everything." I'm like, "Well, not really. I don't, I didn't see it as giving up something. I saw it
Mm-hmm.
as, you know, um, in order to experience part of life that I'd never had before. I had to, yeah, I guess, call it like leave my friends behind and everything and
Mm-hmm.
move out here. But when I had finished college, back when I guess I was 22, I'm actually from Nova Scotia, it's on the East Coast. I had finished college at the time, and, I grew up in somewhat of a small town, I guess. And
Mm-hmm.
I was quite content to stay there, um, I don't know, just my parents were there and I just had a nice little life. But um, one day something just told me, like, after I finished college, I couldn't really get a job in my field, and I was working on a bar, serving drinks and having a great time doing that. But
Mm-hmm.
one day something just said, you've got to leave and you've got to go out west. And I had a one friend out there, and it just like, as soon as like this, I don't know what you call it, this voice, whatever you want to see, it's just something said, you got to do this. And I made that decision, and I
Mm-hmm.
did. Again, so this moving to Japan was actually relatively easy compared to that decision I made, where it was
Mm-hmm.
like leaving a hometown. I'd never been anywhere before I did that. Um, and that was more scarier because I was leaving behind my friends, family, girlfriend, you name it, everything. And it didn't make any sense at all. People said, why are you doing this? And I'd be like, I don't know. Um, you know, and my parents are very supportive of it. They even bought me the ticket because I think they want
Mm-hmm.
me to go out into the world and just, see what I could find. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that was a big part of the journey. So making that leap was actually more difficult because it was the first time I did it. So coming to Japan wasn't as hard as, if I hadn't done that originally, maybe I wouldn't have made the bigger leap to come here.
So that was like prepping you for this bigger move in your life. So, what did you study in college? Did you end up I think you said you didn't find a job that was in line with what you study, which I see so many of my friends going
Mm.
through right now. They study a specific major and then they come out and they cannot find jobs that is in
Mm.
alignment with that. So was that your situation as well?
Yeah, and again, I studied electrical engineering, so
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think there were jobs I could have found, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Once I made that decision that I was going to leave, it wouldn't have mattered if somebody had shown up the next day and said, "Hey, we got a job for you." I probably would have said, "Nope, I'm leaving." So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but no, I did find like it wasn't just, and this was again, this was like a while ago, but this was even before we had internet, so.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, I think it's even more difficult because a lot of people are, younger people are graduating, and just with the pace at the way things are changing, like,
Mm-hmm.
you could enter university tomorrow, graduate in 4 to 6 years from now, and by that time, like what you just spent all that time studying could be a little bit outdated. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
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 So I think
So,
young people are
mhm,
challenged by that. So.
and I see so many of my friends, they have their self-worth and the identity so attached to what they spend the past 4 years in college studying. So they feel really defeated when they are unable to pursue a career path doing what they have studied. So what kind of advice could you give to these young people if they're going through that situation right now and they feel like they're a failure if they can't build a successful career based on what they study?
Well, yeah, like, I mean, I've talked to people about this, and, one of the things that I believe, and I think Gary Vaynerchuk said this as well, is that your identity is not attached to what you do. You know, that may be part of your passion, but you know, I mean, I studied engineering, but I didn't attach myself to. I didn't think to myself, well, okay, you know, I studied this thing. Well, actually, to be honest, I felt obligated that because I studied it, I had to find a job in this field. I just spent, you know, 4 years of my life studying it. So if I don't find a job doing this, then what else can I do? And then, you know, you start to feel like you're a failure and you can't move forward. But so it's a big commitment. But, you know, you're not attached to that. For me, like, you know, when I decided to leave all that behind, I quit my job and I moved here and started teaching English, which is something completely different, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't need like a lot of training per se. And then later on, I started writing books. But a lot of this was really like self-study. And I think that regardless of what you're studying in college, like you have to be prepared for change. And a lot of people are, you know, we're and naturally, I think we're resistant to change because especially if you're invested in something, you know, you don't just want to leave it behind and go pursuing something else, you know. So for me, it was like always having that flexibility to know that anything can change on a dime. And if it does, I have to be ready for it. So I spent, you know, I spent a lot of time studying other books, personal development books, self-help books. And I wanted to prepare myself for the future. And I didn't know what the future was going to hold for me. I guess nobody really does, right? But I also didn't want to rely on just, you know, one single form of education either to determine that. You know, I wanted to be in charge of my own destiny. And the best way I could do that is to go outside of what I've been trained to do and research, you know, what the experts were advising to do. Like my mentors would be, you know, like Tony Robbins or Brian Tracy or, you know, Gary Vaynerchuk, which I think a lot of people know from social media, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I know that you are someone who's dedicated to continue to master yourself in every aspect of your life. Have you always been this way, even when you were back in college? Like, did you read personal development books, self-help books, or that's something that happened after college?
It definitely happened afterwards. Yeah. No, when I was in college, I was probably just going with the flow, like a lot of other people. And I went that way for, you know, I lived my life that way for quite a long time until one day I just had this deep feeling of, I don't know, dissatisfaction, I guess, and failure would be another way to put it. I just felt like I wasn't progressing. You know, I thought life was all about working hard and earning money, and then you get a promotion and you get a mortgage and everything would be, you know, wonderful. It wasn't really working out that way for me. And I was watching other people doing these things too. And I don't know, didn't seem to be working out for them either. So I thought there's got to be more to it than this. So I started on this journey where I wanted to find out what that was, you know, like, you know, I don't know, what's the secret to happiness, for example, or what does it mean to live a fulfilling lifestyle? You know, like part of what I do is teaching people how to build that thriving lifestyle, and it has very little to do with things that we can acquire through, I mean, you know, money or just like dedicating our time 12 to 16 hours a day working, for example. So.
Yeah. So where do you find your fulfillment nowadays? Like when it comes to happiness and joy, I know it's not from chasing external things like a good job or good grades. So where does fulfillment comes from for you nowadays?
Yeah, it's nowadays it's taking the time to really think deeply about what matters to me, because first of all, knowing that time is limited, and I know like the younger you are, the more distant you may feel like you have a lot of time, and trust me, I know, because time is very, very important, because it's the only resource you have that you can't replace, right? You could lose your money, you can lose everything, and it can be replaced, but so for me, it's like valuing that time every day. Like I was teaching English for about 20 years. I was working in a school. It definitely got to the point where that wasn't what I wanted to do. And I knew that years before, which is when I started writing. And I knew that if I could, make a career out of selling books, I could get out of that job not just so that I could quit my job and retire on a beach and earn passive income, because that's not what it's about either. But I felt like I was not living up to my fullest potential, which was, helping people to overcome their difficulties, overcome their fears. And so anyway, I quit my job this year so that I could, just do writing full time, focus on that. And that's where I get my fulfillment, is really just helping people, creating materials. We're creating courses now that are going to come out next year, and just expanding on that so that I can have a bigger impact on the world.
Oh, that's so amazing. I feel like I'm following your footsteps in so many ways, because I also came from a background of teaching, but in more so the traditional school system. But now my passion is in teaching people to live up to their fullest potential. So, I believe that at the end of the day, it all comes down to fulfillment comes from when we're living to our unique, authentic self and really embracing what our gifts are. But how do we know, how do we get clarity on what that specific gift is that we have inside, especially for a lot of us growing up our whole entire lifetime, we've always been doing what other people tell us to do, like our parents, our teachers, society. So how do we start to go back into ourselves and formulate that identity for ourselves?
Yeah, you have to listen. Like, the heart never lies, and the heart knows everything. And I felt that when I was tapped into that and I really listened to, like I said, something was always guiding me, and it was saying, you have to go and do this, right? Now, if somebody else had told me that, I probably wouldn't have listened. But when this, call it the voice, said, you really have to move out west, you have to go and do this. And I tuned in right away, and it was just call it intuition, but tapping into that intuition and knowing that, it's always telling you the truth, right? But to get to that point, you have to cut out all the other chaos and the noise. And there's a lot of it, we're so connected to everything, connected or disconnected, whichever way you look at it, with all our gadgets and social media. And there's a lot of confusion going on, and we're getting all these messages, and this person says that, and, he said this. But I like to turn that off for about 30 minutes a day and just get some stillness time in, where I can just sit quietly and think. And I'll do that at night, maybe for half an hour, maybe once during the day. But really, it really helps to just stop and listen and cut out all the chatter. So having said that, if you feel something is right, it's just a knowing that when you're onto something, when you're feeling passionate about it or driven to do something, a lot of people, we turn it off. I think I turned it off for many years, and or I would say, I'll do it when I'm ready, or there's just always an excuse to do something else. But tap into that intuition and do a lot of reading. Spend at least 30 minutes a day focused on something that is focused on something that you feel very compelled to create, whether it's to create something, or whether it's to hook up with somebody like a mentor that can guide you along the way.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
And I feel like it's personally, I know how this is it's a constant battle between the higher self, that intuition's calling me forward, but then there's that limiting beliefs inside of me that's constantly trying to fight that part of me. So how do we, what are some of the tips that you can give us when it comes to overcoming those limitations inside of ourselves? How can we get rid of those beliefs that just don't serve us?
Yeah, a lot of our limitations, they're lies from the past. And, everybody has a certain level of trauma to a certain extent. And you don't have to recognize what that is exactly, but you have to know, you do have limiting beliefs. We all do. And your limiting beliefs they'll affect everything, because they affect our thoughts. We start to think, I'm not worthy, for example, or, I'm not good enough. These are the internal monologue, that negative monologue. It's on a constant replay, and it keeps playing. And as long as you're living within, if these are your limiting beliefs, then you want to move outside of that. you start to change. You can change that monologue, and you can, imagine, like taking call it a cassette tape, which we don't use anymore. But if you were to erase the tapes and then create your own tapes, like what would it sound like? So you got to create your own voice, instead of tuning into the voices that we've been listening to for so long, because we don't realize. I mean, growing up, developing, we get all these messages, we internalize everything, and we over the years we create our own internal sound system per se, and it's just playing these. And a lot of it is like, a lot of it's from the failures of the past. Like I'll give an example. Like in high school, I was not a good student. I almost failed every subject. I did really poorly. Somehow I graduated. I don't know how, but I managed to get through. But I always used to think back to that whenever I wanted to do something that was challenging, or I would always say, oh, but I can't do that because I was never good at math, or I was never good at this. And I realized, like, every time I told myself, like, I was never good at, or I can't do this, or I shouldn't, then I was reinforcing that message, and that just continues through the years, and you continue to reinforce it. And then when you do that, your actions follow through with that, What you reinforce is what you follow through with. So my actions would be detrimental to what I really wanted to accomplish as well, and that affects everything, because those limiting beliefs will affect the type of work you take on. You might say somebody who has low confidence or low self-esteem issues, and which is most of us. We may take a job that pays like very low. Like we may take a job that's actually below what we're really worth, because we feel like that's what we're worth. It's whereas somebody else who's feeling very vibrant and very passionate about their life, they may say no to this, and they'll take this other job, which is much harder to get, but that's what they go for. And they believe that they can get it. They most likely will. And even if they don't, they're going to try again, and they're going to try again until they succeed.
Right. So it sounds like step number one is really just to stay aware of what's going on in our mind, and at least being able to point that out. I believe it's like the first step to really be able to rewire the brain. So how do we, what should we do specifically when there's like the negative self-talk that just pops up? Like what if, for example, one day I'm just starting to feel like I'm unworthy. So what are some specific steps that you personally take immediately in that moment to overcome that?
Yeah, so I'm aware of the tapes now, whereas I wasn't before, like the replay.
Yeah.
Because it just feels so natural. Like, like for example, like, oh, if only I had money, I could do this, and that's it. It's like, wait, now, if I had money, I could, and then I visualize what would happen if I had the money to do this. So that's just an example, but. If I don't have the skills for that, so I can't do that job, even though I really want to. It's beyond my skill set. The thing is, skills are learnable, right? So if I had this skill set, I could, or I would be doing this, right? You gotta be aware of this tape when it's telling you the lies. You've got to basically just shut it off and start to play your own script. So the book actually I just launched last week is Empower Your Thoughts, and that's what I talk about in this book, is that it's about changing that script. But to get to that point where you can actually be aware of it, is that you have to become aware of it, right? So just by knowing that it exists, first of all, is a big step, and then listening to it, because our limiting beliefs, limiting thoughts, all these things, again, they were created by you, and they can be taken apart by you as well. That's the great thing about it. That, like, a lot of people think that they're stuck with it. They're stuck in their mindset. Mindset is either a fixed mindset or a growth mindset, which is what Carol Dweck talks about in her book Mindset. And my mindset many years ago was a fixed mindset. I felt like, okay, well, I went to school and I studied this, and that's it. That's all I can do. And the funny thing is that even though I studied electrical engineering, it wasn't what I wanted to do. I just did it because it was like one of the few courses I could get into, and I thought, oh, cool, I'll just take this course. But later on, I realized I wanted to transfer out of that. but my fixed mindset was telling me, no, this is what I invested in. This is what I'm going to do. When I started doing a lot of reading, Tony Robbins, his book Awaken the Giant had a huge impact on me. When I started doing some reading and learning about what a growth mindset is, I realized that, hey, wait a minute, I'm not actually trapped. I can actually do what I want to do. I didn't realize that before. When I suddenly made that realization, it's almost like, I don't know, nothing could stop me after that. So.
Oh, that's so powerful. Yeah, the same thing happened to me. It's like the moment you believe that it's possible for yourself, that's when everything starts showing up in your life. So I feel like a lot of our listeners are probably like they know there's something inside of them they just really want to do, but yet they're still super scared, right? I think I heard this from somewhere else before, that they said that what we can gain from a situation, it's intangible. We cannot see it, it's invisible, but what we could potentially lose is something very real to us that we can see right now, here in this moment. So how do we believe in something that we cannot yet see, and really just go forward and trusting the process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I believe in visualization. So I do visualization techniques, and I've always visualized everything that I wanted to do that seemed impossible. But the reason it was impossible is because I hadn't achieved it yet, and everything's impossible before we actually try it. So whether that's, speaking a second or a third language, or, traveling around the world, it always seems like some dream that's way out there until you actually start to put the plan into action. So, I spend, I'm a daydreamer by nature. Maybe that's why I write, but I'm just always dreaming about, if I'm watching a Harry Potter movie, I visualize, it's not Harry Potter on a broomstick, it's me. And I see myself as kind of like in this world where I can create anything and make it happen. So the reason I'm bringing this up is, like, a lot of us, we don't see ourselves as the heroes in our own story. You really have to put yourself in that situation. Like, you're the hero in your own story. So how do you want the story to end? If you're like an actor on stage, I mean, you've got the director and the producer, and they're guiding you around, but I mean, it's your character. What if you were to you could do whatever you wanted? What would it be? And what I found is a lot of people were afraid of failure, but for me, it's like, okay, we're afraid to take action because we might fail. Well, I'm afraid to not take action because if I don't take action, I'm going to fail anyway. So you end up stuck, right? So maybe I'm just going to rephrase that. I'm always afraid of the things that I don't do, because the things that I'm not doing is going to lead to my failure down the road. So yeah, you may try something, it may not work out, but you may try again a different way, and you have to keep trying. I'm sure we all know Edison, who made 10,000 light bulbs or something like that. Well, maybe, I don't know how he felt around trial number 1,000, but he probably felt like giving up. So just like thinking of it in that terms, is that there's something you really want, you've got to try to go for it. You've got to try really hard, and you've got to be determined to get it, no matter what happens along the way. People are going to tell you, you shouldn't be doing this, or you might end up losing your friends along the way because they're not going to want to join you on this journey. It's just too radical, or, they're not ready for it. So, sort of just circling back to our point there, whenever I want to try something new, I have to visualize what that's going to look like, 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, so that, I know where I'm going to end up at. No, it may not be, where I end up at may not be exactly what I visualized, but I do know that I'll be in a different spot than if I were to just stay stuck, basically. So
yeah,
I don't like being in a rut. So I'm always, my goal is to always I like being comfortable, and I sometimes enjoy being complacent. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're in a rut and you're stuck and it's painful, then it's time for you to either, you got to get out of that, or you're going to end up being very unhappy and dissatisfied with your life. So
yeah, absolutely. And the reason why I'm really passionate about this summit is because, like, I talk to so many people in their 30s and 40s, And that's when they realize they spend like the past decades doing something that they don't truly love, and they find themselves stuck. So why not jumpstart that journey and find out what it is that they want now, and then go ahead and build that. So this is one question that I know I personally struggle with right after college. You know, I always been taught to believe that I cannot do what I love and also make a lot of money at the same time. So, and I realized that's not true. What do you think on that situation?
Yeah, that's a good one, because recently I was talking to some other author friends where there's a lot of noise that, especially in our field, like with writing, that it's easy to make income from books, or say, let's just not say like books in particular, but say passive income. So there's a lot of, you go to Facebook or social media, wherever, somebody's always promoting something about how to make money fast, and do this fast and this. And so we get into this mindset where like, it should be easy. All I have to do is sign up for this, $20,000 course, and then I'll be making passive income for the rest of my life. So my point is that, no matter what you decide to do, it's going to be hard work, and that there's no such thing as passive income. It does not exist. Even after you're doing what you love, you'll have to work really hard at it. The good thing about it is that you're going to be working hard doing something you love, and that's much better than working 8 hours in a job where you're looking at the clock, waiting for it to end. I'd rather, I probably spend 14, 15 hours a day on books, coaching, and the thing is that that's what I love to do. So I don't mind putting in the time. But if you're putting in 8 hours a day towards something that you just feel nothing for, you're going to be very, dissatisfied with the way your life is going. So anyway, so I kind of went off on a tangent, and I lost track of the question. But just circling back to that, is that you can make money doing what you love, but if that is your goal, is just to make money, I don't think it's going to work out, because it's really like when things get really tough, like if you're trying to build your own like online business, for example, whatever that may be, you're going to have a lot of struggles in the beginning. You might have to work 1 to 5 years to get it going, and it may fail. And that's the reality, is that most of them do. A lot of people aren't willing to or ready to accept the fact that they're going to fail at it. And that's where they get stuck in the beginning, is they think, oh, well, I was going to start this thing, and then, but, so-and-so failed at it, so I'm not going to do it either. I probably can't make a go of it. But the thing is that you've got to really, really want it. And and if you don't really want it, chances are you're not going to make it work, and you're not going to make that money that you want either. So.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with this, because at the beginning of my journey too, I was chasing money, the external success, and only to realize that's not where the fulfillment and true success came from. So it sounds like we should really be following what makes our heart sing and what really makes us feel alive. And I believe that money is more so like a byproduct of doing the work that you love. So I know like personal development, continuously growing ourselves is a lifelong journey. So what are some things that you're currently working on now for yourself? Like, do you still have fears that you're overcoming nowadays?
Sure, I think I do. Sometimes I have fears of not succeeding, so, but I realize like, for me, those fears are just, I think to myself, well, actually, I've always had that fear. Like I probably had it when I was, when I was 15 or when I was 20. I feared the same things. I remember actually thinking back to then, I was afraid of not passing the test in school, or losing something. And even, like 25 years later, I'm still fearing the same things. But I realized like, what Susan Jeffers said in her book, "Feel the fear and do it anyway." That's what I always keep in my mind. Just fantastic book, great author. And I just love that message, is that you have to feel whatever you're fearing, you have to feel it and just take action anyway. So sure, I have just, a lot of the same fears that everybody else does, but I try not to allow those fears to influence my, moving forward. Right. So, which is why I've written, like some books like Empower Your Fear, for example, helping people to overcome rejection. Rejection was another big one. To this day, that still affects the way that I I approach people, or if I like, it could be like a job interview. You know, I remember getting to the door of some company where I was going to have a job interview, and I turned away because I just thought, I walked in and I saw all these like people in suits, and they looked very professional, and I just thought, there's no way I'm going to get this job. And I remember just walking out and just like that total fear of rejection. So rejection, for the most part, it's never an external thing. It's always internal. We just externalize it. We think that the world is rejecting us, but in fact, we reject ourselves way before we ever let anybody else do it. So just thought to throw that in there. But yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time reading. I find that's the reading or listening to audiobooks or whatever it is. I'm just like, I love listening to the messages that some of the our thought leaders are trying to teach us, and we have to spend time, listening to what they're saying, because there's a lot of not just inspiration and motivation, but they care, like I mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk or Tony Robbins, and I just love like listening to the way that they speak to their people is very powerful, because you can feel the passion coming from their wisdom. So if you don't have a mentor or something that you're tapped into, or you're getting that daily dose of motivation or love, you've got to tap into it. So because the thing about fear is that it's again, it's just a temporary block. It can be removed very easily. We just make it into this big monster that's stopping us from, and that's probably why my current book I'm writing called Fail Big, and that's I'm expanding on that, because I wanted to write a book that teaches people that it's okay to fail. It's okay to fear failing. It's natural. But when it keeps you stuck and you end up like a year, 2 years, or 5 years later, you're doing the same thing because you still haven't taken that first step. That's when for me, that's real pain. So just not having this life, having a life, which was like probably 1 in a billion chances that you're actually here to begin with, and now you're too afraid to do what you want to do. So.
Oh yeah. And I think like nowadays it's so amazing with technology and our connectedness with everyone. Like it's so easy to access a YouTube video or amazing books like your books on Amazon. And it's so accessible to really just tap into that and really change our lives by reading, getting a mentor. So what other like non-negotiable steps you would say for someone going on this journey to develop themselves, other than like daily reading, getting a mentor? Are there any other things that you would say it's a must?
Yeah, it's having your goals written down. So one of the very first things I did years ago, which it was, to be honest, was how I got to Japan in the first place, is I picked up, I think it was like Tony Robbins' book one day, and it had this section on goal setting. I was like, goals, wow, I've never done that before. And I actually did it. And it didn't take me that long to do it. And surprisingly, most people don't have their goals written down. They don't even know what they are. Having those goals written down, it can be one, master goal, which I call them one master goal, or it can be 2 or 3 or 4 goals, a few short-term, but long-term goals of, I had 4, actually. I had 4 goals that I wanted to accomplish, and I've accomplished 3 of them. And basically, like, having those written down, looking at them every day, you've got to reinforce like what it is you really want. That'd be the first thing. Without knowing what you want, you're never going to get what you're never really going to know. So you're just going to be wandering around, grasping at the next best thing that's shiny objects that people are dangling in front of you, and there's a lot of those. So,
and which is, go ahead.
As long as you're very clear about that, you can say no to a lot of the things that you normally might say yes to. So.
What would you say about like the external environment? Is that a very key component as well, other than what's going on inside our mind and our emotions?
I think that whatever's happening externally, it might impact your life. Of course, if the economy crashes, we're affected by that. But also realizing that there's nothing you can do about the economy crashing, but there is something you can do about how, how you interpret that. Like, what are you going to do because this happened, right? So as long as we're thinking that our environment is, we're controlled by our environment because, this is happening, or I don't know, maybe somebody did something to us, for example. Now I can't stop that person from doing something towards me, but I can make a decision as to how I'm going to interpret that and take action. So,
yes. And it's super empowering when you can take that power back and know that you have control over everything that happens around you. So just to wrap up this interview, I have a few more questions for you, Scott.
Sure.
So can you imagine if you were to never follow your inner calling and that intuition? Where would you be now with your life?
I think about that sometimes, actually. Yeah. And well, first of all, I probably would not have traveled the world, or a good part of it anyway, which I would have been missing out on a huge, like, just the adventures, the things I've seen. And I think a lot of that, like, it comes down to, well, there's that. And also what I'm doing these days, like, everything was basically step building, in order for me to get here, I had to take these certain steps. And just traveling back to whether it be 20, 25 years ago, I think I still would have been really scared. I would have been living in a much smaller shell than I was before, where I was before. And I just felt like, that's just I just wanted to go out into the world and explore as much as I could. And for me, like, it was never about success or money or anything. It's just the experience of life. And hey, there's nothing wrong with, staying in your hometown and living your life there. That's great. It's just that I felt, though, to explore everything that was outside of myself, to grow, I had to leave that for a while. And what I like about it is that when I do return back home, I can revisit the memories, and you can see your growth, and that's really like the gift of life, is when you can get to a certain point where, a lot of our viewers maybe are probably, a little bit younger than I am, but someday you're going to be at the point where you can look back on your life, maybe it'll be 10 or 15 or 20 years. And if you can look back and say, yeah, I did a really good job, then, like, you were on a good path. You're on a good path, and if you're really happy with where you're at, then, keep going with that. But I think that I'm glad that I made the choices that I did. They weren't easy. I had to leave a lot behind, but that was a sacrifice. So whenever you decide to make a decision like that, just be prepared that you'll always have to give up something to get it. And if you think in the moment where it's too painful to give that up, you have to use your vision, call it visualization, or you have to project into the future where you could be if you do that, and where you won't, like I said, so project your vision ahead of, whether it be 10 or 15 or 20 years ahead. See yourself living that lifestyle. And hopefully that can take you from here to there. There's a lot of work in between. You're going to have to probably, work really hard, but if you're willing to, if you're willing to give up what you've got to get to where you want to be, then I'd say go for it. So.
Yeah, I love that. I think fulfillment and true happiness it comes from progress and continuous growth and expansion. So I think you touch on this a little bit, but this is the last question I'm going to ask you. Knowing what you know now, all the amazing experience that you have accumulated doing the work that you love, if you can go back in time and be talking to your old younger self, when you came out of college, what would you say to that version of Scott?
Yeah. Let's see. That's a good question. I haven't really thought about that before. Maybe I did. I was too afraid to answer it. But yeah, if I could meet my younger self, I would probably just say, everything's going to be okay. Like, you're okay. You're not, well, maybe you're a little bit broken, but that's okay too. Because no matter what's happened before, no matter where, what you're doing right now, you have the power to create anything you want. And I don't mean that to sound fluffy or anything. It's just the truth. It's like, you're not, nothing's trapping you except yourself. And that's where, we get into like, well, I'm trapped because of this or that, or my parents told me I have to do this, or I don't think any of that matters. You've got the power to make your own choices. So whenever, if you're finding yourself right now thinking that you're stuck, it's because you're probably stuck in your mind. And you can change that right now. Just, I don't know. And I don't know, honestly, I don't know if I would actually tell my younger self that, because I would need that person to, because probably if I had, he probably would just say, you're bothering me, go away. I probably wouldn't have listened anyway. But I did notice that back in those days, I had very intuitive moments where I would meet certain, and this is just something that maybe is important for people, is that be very aware of the people that you're meeting on your journey, because you're going to meet somebody and they're going to tell you something, and it's going to be so important. You're not actually going to realize it till later on. So I've had people that I've met where they gave me a message, and I didn't realize it at the moment, but it was the message I needed to hear in that moment. And it actually later on, years later, I remember that message, and I thought, oh, that's what she meant, or that's what he meant by that. So just be very aware of the people you're meeting, and because you're going to meet, it might be just like a passing moment. It could be someone you meet on a train and they just tell you something, and suddenly, boom, they're off. They get off the next stop. You never see them again, but you remember what they said to you. So there's moments in your life where you're gonna need to hear those messages, and just be very aware of that. So.
Yeah, so just paying attention, being conscious of everything that goes on around us. Well, I just want to say I'm so grateful, and I know all of our listeners are so, they have the honor and the privilege to hear from someone like you who have walked the path and been through these experiences, and be able to pick your brain for these past 45 minutes and really get to know everything that you have came to learn, really shortcut that learning curve, or whatever you would call it, so they can go out there and they could really go out there and make that decision today, and to build a life that they truly love. And I just want to say thank you so much, Scott, for taking the time out to do this interview with me, even though we have to coordinate a time zone difference and everything. And I know that my listeners would love to continue to learn from you. So I know you also have a free gift prepared for our listeners. So where can they access that free gift, and where can they find you online?
Yeah, so if they go to scottallanSite.com, www, they can find my website. My website right now is transitioning over to, we're moving everything over to another platform, but everything is still accessible on the older site. So if you go there, there is a downloadable gift, the Fearless Confidence Action Guide.
Awesome.
So you can check that out. If you go to Amazon and you type in Scott Allan, Allan, then you can probably find my books under the Kindle store. So.
Yeah, Scott has so many amazing books on Amazon. Definitely go check them out. So thank you everyone for tuning in to this interview today, and make sure to come back to listen to more amazing individuals such as Scott. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.